But so we're going to be looking at the following. And I've succumbed, I think, to the same thing that has plagued our ancestors for generations upon generations, in that we're reading in this week's portion, it's a double portion. One of my Bible professors told me that Chukat is an awful portion for Moses. It's just awful because his sister dies. He's told he's not going to go into the land of Israel, and his brother dies. And also he hits the rock, right? So it's just not a good week for Moses. But the thing that's puzzled our commentators for generations, for hundreds and hundreds of years, is, well, what did Moses do that was so terrible? And there is reams and volumes of things that are written about this. And I've really struggled to try and come to terms with it, and got myself lost in a bit. And it seems like I haven't come to a conclusion either. But what I've decided what we're going to do is we're going to walk through some of these explanations of what they were trying to ascertain what Moses' sin was, and we'll go from there. So first of all, there is a need to set the stage. Okay, let's look at the context here of what his sin actually is. Okay, and to set the stage there, we need to look at the background to the story and how the Torah actually treats this. So this first one is, you'll notice, not from this week's portion, but from the book of Exodus, from Shemot. Okay, and there it tells us that Moses, what was that thing that Moses was talking about? Okay, from the wilderness of Sin. This is, by the way, just after the crossing of the Red Sea. Okay, you would assume everything would be great. Everything, the people have just witnessed the awesome glory of God, the Ten Commandments, the splitting of the sea. You really shouldn't be skeptical at this point anymore of God's power, God's awesomeness, the ability to God perform miracles. Okay, so from the wilderness of Sin, the whole Israel community continued by stages as the Lord would command. They encamped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses, "Give us water to drink." They said, and Moses replied to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you try the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with these people? Before long they will be stoning me." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take along the rod which you struck the Nile and set out. I will be standing there before you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock." Okay, strike the rock, and water will issue from it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. The place was named Massa and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled in the people, and because they tried the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord present amongst us or not?" Okay, this is not the problem, but this is just already an episode that's already happened. Okay, now let's fast forward to this week's portion. Very similar, yet quite different. Okay, Vayvo b'nei Israel kol hayda midbar Tzin. The Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Tzin on the first new moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. Okay, that's just it, and it seems like it's just an afterthought, because right away the community was about water. Now, by the way, there's a beautiful midrash here that whenever the Israelites traveled, there was always a well that followed them. There was always had water, and this was attributed to Miriam. Okay, as an aside, and they draw this conclusion because Miriam died there, right? Batamat Sham Miriam, and she was buried there. And then the very next thing, V'lo haya mayim la'ida, and there was no water, meaning that the water followed the Israelites because of the graciousness and just the status of Miriam, and she wasn't there anymore, and therefore the water stopped following them, and they derive this because immediately after she dies and is buried, there's no water there. But that's a different midrash, a different time. Wow. So what happens? The community was without water, and they joined against the Vikalu. And this is a very important verb that they use here, that they gather together as a community. It's much more than just gathering. Okay, it's much more than just gathering. There's a purpose to their coming together. Then they and what's on against Moses and Aaron. Okay, the people quarreled now with Moses. You can see how this is escalating. It's escalating. And if you've ever been going enough time without a precious resource like his water, I'm assuming here nobody has ever gone that far or that long without having water. Yom Kippur notwithstanding, right? But even just thinking at your time of Yom Kippur, how do you feel by the end of it? Right? Amazing, because we finished davening with Ne'ilah on such a high. I'm just kidding, right? A lot of times when you're fasting, you feel rubbish, and sometimes you start to feel desperate. We might not feel desperate because we know we can get up and go to and get our drink if we need it. But imagine being in a position where you can't. You're thirsty, you're not well, and there's a desperation because you don't know where your next drink of water is going to come from. Okay, so the people quarreled. If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the instance of God. Right? And this is talking about another one of the rebellions. Why have you brought the Lord's congregation into this wilderness for our beasts to die here, our beasts to die here or there? Right? We've heard this kind of rebellion before. This conversation we've heard before. Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vines or pomegranates? There is not even water to drink. Now, which is interesting is they're really futzing, or they're really dying for something to drink. And they talk about grain, figs, vines, or pomegranates. And it's almost like even water to drink is an afterthought. But okay. Moses and Aaron came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. Right? This is sort of, this happens sometimes, like plu al panehem. And it's an idiom meaning for like, I don't know what we're supposed to do here. The presence of, and they're asking for God's intercession. The presence of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, you and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes, order the rock to yield its water. Okay? Order the rock. Okay? The hishkita, which levakesh, to request. Okay? No place here does it say hit. It says request. And before their very eyes, order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts. Okay? Good. So now it's supposed to be different. Now the question is, if that's all they're going to do, why is that there? If all they're going to do is speak, why does God tell them take the rod? Interesting question. We're going
in order to assemble the community?
Well, because if you remember up here, take with you, this is in Exodus, take along the rod which you struck the Nile, right? Take this because you're going to need it. Right, you watch any movie and they introduce, like, they focus on something. That element, that object is going to play a role later on, right? Almost never will a movie or TV show or a book or anything bring out something deus ex machina. Like when you do that, it's very unsatisfying. And same thing here, bring the rod because you're going to need it. Here, bring the rod. And it's take the rod, assemble the community, and before their very eyes, order the rock. Talk to the rock. Well, why are you bringing the rock? Why are you bringing that? It's not really clear. Is the rod a conduit of transformation? No. The rod is really more of a. It's more of a.
Authority.
Yes and no. But and it's important to understand here, if it's that authority, well, at this point the people know who Moses is. Why? And it's more of like, you take this, but you're not going to need it. Seems a bit superfluous here. Okay. All right, let's finish, and then we'll have some of the questions. Thus you shall produce. Okay, so Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he had commanded him. Okay, everything good so far. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" Uh-oh. That's not what God said to do. And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice. Twice.
He's obviously angry and
For sure.
frustrated.
He is peeved to no end.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's had how many different times. And look, this is that culmination of these rebellions. Remember, the last several weeks we've been looking at each and every one of these rebellions. And it gets to a point where you got to be, listen, we don't believe in saints as our leaders. We really don't. Right? And at some point, everyone's going to have their breaking point. Everyone's going to have their breaking point. It seems like this is what's happened here. And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. But what's interesting is, out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. So, if that wasn't what's supposed to happen, why did water come out? Moses did not follow the instruction. Moses did not follow the instruction. So, what is the reaction? Anna, are you trying to say something there?
Yeah, what's the instruction from God? What's the difference?
It's just up there in A.
Right here. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the community congregation and their beasts." Now, it's much clearer in the Hebrew, okay? Kach et hamateh, take the rod, hakel et ha'edah, gather the congregation, ata, you, Aaron and your Aaron achicha, and your brother, vedibartem, and say to them, right? El hasela le'eneihem, before their very eyes, benatan meimav. Vedibartem el hasela, and speak to the rock before their very eyes, and it will give you water. So they went out, and water will come out from the rock. And you will satiate or quench the thirst of the people. Okay, so it's instructive here. V'dibartem el hasela, and speak to the rock. It really is a more harif way of saying it, and that's why here it says order the rock. But you want to make sure you understand here in the Hebrew, v'dibartem means that it's using words, because one could, order the rock. Well, he could order the rock by hitting it, right? That's why the English translation loses a little bit of that nuance. You need to see it here in the Hebrew, v'dibartem. Clearly is saying, use your words, right? I feel like I have to say it to my children all the time, use your words.
So Moses hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. That's where he went wrong?
Well, that's what is one of the things that he didn't quite listen to. Now, so just looking here, what would you say is the sin? Because we know that he does. So what's the sin? Just before we even get to the reaction, looking at the text, what is the sin?
There's a few of them. There's this, obviously the striking and getting angry, but there's also the words he uses, the showing his true feelings to the people instead of behaving like a moderate leader.
Right? Shimuna hamorim. Listen, you rebels.
Yeah.
Right? That he gets angry.
Yeah, and he shows what he's really thinking.
Yeah. I've had about enough of you guys. Because God has his back. What do you mean there, Matt?
Well, God would have put up with as much as Moses has up to this point. And I feel like
I see. That's referring back to the question before, that the water came out anyway.
Because he was like, you know what? You got close enough. I would have done the same thing in that position.
Yeah. Right? It's like, I'm not, or it's also, he has his back. I think you understand, like, Moses is my guy. So
exactly.
he didn't quite do it right, but that's fine. I'm still not going to embarrass him in front of the people. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. And then you'll lecture him later on down the line.
Yeah. Okay, great. You did. Now, Moses, come over. Can I have a word with you for a second, please?
Like a good Jewish parent.
Yeah. Oh, is that what we're supposed to do? Let me write that down. Sorry, I dropped something. Oh, ouch. Yay, working from home. Love it. Anyway, so we have a couple different theories about what's gone wrong here. Okay.
Can
So-
I just say, please,
At
Rabbi?
any point.
Hello?
Yeah, Vered, at any point.
Yeah. I just want to say, isn't the sin the casting of doubt here?
Well, do you read that here from the text?
Yes. Do you really think we can get water out of this rock? It's
Well,
like
he's not saying that. What he's saying is, shall we get water for you out of the rock? Right now, you can read that.
I think there is doubt in that, or
Yeah.
at least
Good.
sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, sarcasm, right? Exactly right. So
But then is Vered saying that he's saying he doesn't believe that God can get water out of the rock? Because we've seen before you can get water out of a rock.
I'm not sure. Vered, what did you mean that? Did you mean that he's sorry? That's clear. It's an excellent question. I wasn't quite clear then. Are you saying that Moses is doubting God?
Yeah, well, I can read it like that.
Okay.
Do you really believe water would come out? It's a rhetorical question that, in my opinion, is either sarcastic or doubtful. My dog, sorry.
I think sarcastic more than doubtful, because of what Shira said, that we already know that water can be produced from a rock. I'm interested in the plural, shall we get water?
Notzim, right?
Yes.
There, instead of yotzim, notzim, we, shall we.
Yes.
Who? Excellent. That's a very good pick up there too. What's he talking about there? What does that mean, we, shall we?
Oh, so maybe he's doubting his own capacity. Their own capacity.
Also, like, there's that joke, right? The Lone Ranger and Tonto are out in the wilderness, and they get surrounded by all these Indians, and the Indians say, "Come here, we're gonna get you, we're gonna kill you both, or we're gonna kill you." And Lone Ranger turns to Tonto and he says, "What are we gonna do?" And Tonto says, "What's this we stuff, paleface?" Right? Like, I don't want anything to do with you. This sort of that idea here. It's shall we? And so you're saying perhaps God's saying, what's this we stuff, paleface? Like, I'm the one doing the miracle, not you.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That's what you mean? Okay, so these are all excellent questions. There's lots of different theories here, but I guess the point is, it seems from the simple reading here of just reading this episode, and it's good that we actually read the text, that God tells him to do something. He doesn't quite do it, he does it, but he doesn't do it exactly the way God asked him to do it, yet we still get the right result. There is also that, that Moses is upset. Shimuna Hamorim, listen, you rebels. Right, so there is some problems here. It's not so totally clear, but this happens. Now let's go. The very next two verses shall give us the response of what God says. Okay, just two verses. Vayamar Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron, Ya'an lo le'emantem bi, Taktishkeni le'enei b'nei Yisrael. Right? But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them. Those are the waters of Meribah, meaning that the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, through which he reaffirmed his sanctity. Right? Now, this is what it talks about here. Ya'an lo he'emantem bi. You did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people. Therefore, you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I had given them. What does that mean?
He wasn't giving enough respect to God and putting God in a good light for the people. So instead of behaving very calmly and not striking the rock, respecting exactly what God had said. Had God said it in front of everyone or only to Moses privately? No one else can
No.
hear God except Moses
Yeah,
anyway.
and the Lord
is that
spoke
right?
to Moses saying, yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, he expected Moses to just do as he said, to behave with dignity, not to do any striking, and certainly not to use the sarcasm and the rudeness. And but because he didn't respect God or present God in a good light to the people, therefore he doesn't deserve
Yep.
to lead into Israel.
And so so at the outset it was Moses being told how to handle the situation, but now after the catastrophe we've got the Lord saying to Moses and Aaron. So is it Moses and Aaron referred to in that plural, we, in the verse above?
So you bring up a very excellent point, right? We can understand Moses, right? And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. So, if I was a lawyer, but I'm not, but if I was a lawyer, right, this would be maybe that point where you say, excuse me, Your Honor, I'd like to separate my defendant from that defendant and have a separate trial, please, because,
Yes.
Aaron must be saying like, wait, what did I do?
Yes.
Right, and I see that with my boys. I see one of them do something, and hey, both of you are in trouble. The other one would be like, well, I didn't do anything, right? Well, you were standing there, or you caught my eye, or whatever. So, but what did Aaron do? Why is Aaron
He didn't
getting in
stop
trouble?
Moses. He didn't calm Moses down.
Okay, he didn't stop Moses. Fair enough.
And he let Moses say, shall we get water for you? So Moses roped him into it, and he could have said, no, don't involve me in this.
Yeah, what's this we stuff, Paleface? I don't want any, I have no part of this, right? Yeah.
There's another point, where he says, what does it say? Therefore, you shall not lead this congregation into the land. I mean, the people who left Egypt weren't the people who went into Israel.
Yep.
So that's more descriptive than prescriptive.
So you're saying this is not a punishment?
Well, it's not necessarily a punishment because the group that left Egypt, having to be in the desert for 40 years to change their mentality from a slave to a free person, they are not the same people who
They're
enter
not the same people.
Canaan.
Except for two.
So what you're saying there is that this is not a punishment. This is just a natural course of things. We've already established that generation is not going to be the one
That's right.
Israel.
That's right.
So it's not a punishment. This is just justifying what's already going to happen in a way.
Yeah.
Yep.
But weren't two of them allowed in?
Yeah, Caleb and Joshua.
Yeah. So to me, it is a punishment, and Moses is being punished because the two exceptions are being allowed in because they behaved well.
Maybe it was a test of Moses' leadership. He was getting old and tired, and God was showing him, in effect, that really you're not up to taking the people on the next
So
step.
let's hold these before we get to the explanation of what we think happened, because believe me, look, there is a tremendous amount of sources here. I'm still scrolling. We're not, and this is like, we're not going to get to this. This is what happens when I start going down.
Still going.
No, I know. So like I get down that rabbit hole, and you realize, oh wait, this class is only an hour long. But that's how confused and that's how difficult this text is. Okay, it's not a simple text. And the problem is very challenging. The rabbis are right? Because part of it is this punishment, right, that you're not going to take in the land of Israel. This seems, right? This seems,
I ask something?
it seems to be out of proportion, right? One time Moses didn't do what he was supposed to do. One time. Name me any other moment where Moses did not listen to God's words explicitly. I can't come up with one. Okay? But now what I want to make sure we understand is, okay, so here it talks about it just at the end. Near the end of this portion, Aaron is going to die now at the end of the portion, at the end of the chapter, excuse me. At Mount Hor, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aaron behor hahar al gvul eretz Edom le'emor. Let Aaron be gathered to his kin, which is a euphemism for he's going to die. He is not to enter the land that I have assigned to the Israelite people. Why? Al asher meritem ki lemei meriva. Because you disobeyed my command about the waters of Meribah.
Because you, meaning both of you,
Yeah.
well, both of you disobeyed my command.
Right. But again, why? What did Aaron do? It's not clear that that's what he did. But this is, again, but they're re-emphasizing, you disobeyed my command. Okay? And then later on in a couple weeks, Pinchas, same portion there. He's telling him again, ascend the heights, these heights of Aberim, and view the land that I've given to the Israelite people. When you have seen it, you too shall be gathered to your kin, just as your brother Aaron was. For in the wilderness of Sin, when the community was contentious, you disobeyed my command to uphold my sanctity in their sight by means of the water. Those, right? Those are the waters in the wilderness of Sin. Now, this is interesting because now it adds Meri Tempi, you disobeyed me, and also the Hagdisheni b'mayim le'enehem. To uphold my sanctity in their sight. What does that mean? Because that wasn't said before.
Rafi?
Yep.
I'm just curious about this shall we, and I'm just wondering whether Moses is trying to give himself elevated status, as in shall we, as in God and I are the same. As opposed to Aaron and Moses.
And that, by the way, also is contentious. The commentators aren't entirely unified in what the we is standing for. Is it we as in Moses and Aaron, or is it we as in God and Moses? Right? It's an excellent pickup. The rabbis also aren't sure exactly what that means.
Because if I was God, I'd be like a bit annoyed, you know?
Right. And I think we could believe and agree with Matt, right? That at this point, right, God's gonna have Moses' back. They've been together, they've been through a lot, and right, like, okay, you didn't quite do that as neatly as I would have preferred. However, you know what? I think at some point we have to accept that Moses has earned the benefit of the doubt, right? Right? Like, he's never messed up before, really. And now he's messed up one time and that's it? Really? So then the final time the Bible mentions it, where are we? The final time that it mentions it, that very day, this is now at the end of Deuteronomy, okay? Moses is going up to die. We're very, very near the end of the Torah reading, the Torah itself, excuse me. That very day, the Lord spoke to Moses, ascend these heights of Aberim to Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab facing Jericho, and view the land of Israel, which I am giving the Israelites you're holding. You shall die on the mountain that you are about to ascend, and you shall be gathered to your kin, as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his kin. All right? Why? For you broke faith with me among the Israelite people at the waters of Meribah, Kadesh, in the wilderness, by failing to uphold my sanctity among the Israelite people.
Exactly. So the sanctity was lost. It was, Moses just couldn't do it anymore. He just couldn't be that perfect.
But Rafi, could it be that Moses didn't say, "Look what the Lord is doing for you," and said, "Look, you miserable lot. This is what we're doing for you." Should he maybe have said, look what the Lord has done for you, bringing water forth.
Mm.
Right. That is exactly what some of the commentators are going to pick up on. All right. Wow. We've already been over. I haven't even gone to the commentaries yet. One of the ones that I really like, this, I keep coming back to Isaac Arama. He wrote the Akedat Yitzchak. I really, really like his commentary. And he's just setting the table for the difficulties that are going to come.
Remind us when he lived.
Isaac Arama was, I can't remember. Let me tell you 1 second. He lived in the 15th century.
Okay,
Started in Spain, died in Italy.
thank you.
Okay. He writes, a table, meat, and a knife before us, but no mouth to eat with. The commandment of God is clearly outlined. The deed that was performed is not concealed from us, and the subsequent wrath of God astonishes us. But no satisfactory explanation emerges. Okay? So I'm putting that out there because from the get-go, there's going to be a lot of rabbis trying to be like, well, it must be this, it must be this, it must be this. And listen, we can come to some rationalization or even some agreement on what the sin is, yet nobody really talks about how that does it actually fit the crime, right? That whether it was God did or Moses didn't sanctify God, did he not listen to God, he disobeyed God, whatever. But again, coming back to Matt's point, okay, he did it one time, right? At some point, but they're saying in Hebrew, right? Dan the zachut, right? Give him the benefit of the doubt. So, what I think I might do, this is Rambam's commentary, and he talks about, rather than translating and going through the whole thing, I didn't put the English in there. I'll have to go back and fix that, sorry. So what Rambam points out, and I put him first because he says there are two sins here. The personal one of Moses inclining towards anger, okay? And when he says, like, he says you're, and we read that because you rebelled against, you didn't follow my commandment. And it says you rebelled against my commandment. And also that he's misleading the people by his display toward anger with regard to the nature of God. Meaning that he implies that God was cruel. Right? That whereas God is actually, we've seen is God is compassionate. God will bring them the water when they need it. But here, God, he's saying that only because they're getting angry will God bring them the water. Not that, wow. Right? That's what Maimonides is hinting at here. That's in this whole translation here. Okay. Ramban, a lot of this is. Oops, I have it in there twice. That shouldn't be there. He, putting it mildly, really does not like Maimonides' take on this, and he a lot of this is about. Here it starts. He's summarizing some of this. That even Ezra saying that he hit it twice because that he lost his concentration, and he hit it a second time with concentration. And that's where he sinned. And he's saying here that Maimonides, a different analysis, and he's quoting that commentary that we just had up there, on and on and on. He's going to proceed to dismantle his Maimonides' approach. Like he really takes great exception to what Maimonides says, and hence the punishment was not because he got angry. Okay. Okay, well, I'm gonna do the following because there's a relatively modern commentator. His name is Or Chaim. Okay, what he does is he summarizes 10 different approaches. Okay, this class I really could have spread out over 2 or 3 sessions, but we're going to summarize here a little bit, okay? Just in the interest of, but just to give you a larger picture of how the rabbis are still trying to get their heads around, even not that long ago, okay? I'm trying to. He was, by the way, in the 17th, 18th century, Morocco, and then Israel. Okay, so he's relatively a couple hundred years after most of these other commentators. So he says, okay, Rashi. No, that's not what I meant to do. Okay. Number one, the 10 different ones, okay? Rashi explains that Moses' error was that whereas God had told him to speak to the rock, he hit the rock instead, okay? That's one category of sin, okay? Number two, Ibn Ezra explained that Moses' error caused the rock not to yield water until Moses struck it for a second time, and that Moses had forgotten God's precise instruction when he struck the rock the first time due to vociferous quarreling by the congregation, okay? Number three, God's anger was caused by Moses hitting the rock a second time. Had Moses remained content to strike the rock once, God would have accepted this as a form of addressing a rock, as one does not expect the rock to listen to words. Number four, according to this view, God's anger was caused by the fact that Moses and Aaron did not sing a song of praise after the water materialized. Such a miracle deserved that it should be acknowledged by not less than a song praising God and thanking him, right? Now, we've seen that happen, for example, at other times, like the crossing of the sea. They sing a song of praise, right? Which happens in front of everybody, and one would assume is quite miraculous, okay? According to this view, Moses sinned by talking down to the Israelites and calling them rebellious. A man of Moses' stature should not have called the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob by a name which belittled them. One of you said that already, I think. So, who said that? I think Nosy, right? Yeah. Okay. Number six, Maimonides, in his treatise, Shmona Prakim, which is the one I quoted up before, feels that God objected to Moses having lost his school when speaking to the Israelites. When the people observed that Moses was angry at them, they concluded that God was angry at them also. Right? Which makes sense because Moses only talks to the people based on what God told them to say. And so if Moses is being angry, God must be angry, right? Right, and that has to do with that sin that the two sins, right? That Maimonides said that it's a personal attack, but it's also misleading the people as to the true nature of God. God's not angry; God's compassionate, but they could see that God might have been angry. Number seven, Rabbeinu Hananel and Nachmanides after him claimed that what angered God was that Moses portrayed himself and Aaron as producing the water by saying, Notzei lachem maim, instead of saying Yotzei lachem maim, right? One of you also caught on that as well, right? We are, what's this we stuff? No. This is God. He will make water come forth for you, not we. And they didn't say that. The formula used by Moses created the impression amongst the people that Moses and Aaron produced the water by means of their own devices and know-how. This is why God said to them, because you have not believed me to make them sanctify me. Right? That was from one of the, I think that was, then verse 12, right? Because you have not believed me to make them sanctify me, or you rebelled against me, okay? Number 8, Rabbi Moshe HaKohen, quoted by Ibn Ezra, also feels that God's anger had to do with Moses' wording of the question, Hamina sela ze notzei maim, do you expect us to produce water from this rock? Whereas we know that there are miracles which are produced by God's word, and others by a combination of God's word and inaction. Moses misled the people into thinking that God could not produce water from this particular rock. He proves his point by quoting Psalms 106, because they rebelled against him and he spoke rashly.
Who proves his point? Sorry, you've confused me. He proves his point by quoting Psalms. Who is
Moshe HaKohen, this guy.
Okay.
And Ibn Ezra as well. They're both.
Sorry.
All right. He's just what Orach Chaim is doing. He's attempting to summarize in as best as he can all the different places of the different sins that they have come up with. Okay. Where was
And
I?
along with that,
Yeah.
along with that, maybe God wanted to use this to refresh the people's faith in God by this great demonstration that just speak to the rock and it will issue forth water because God said so. And they missed the opportunity. It's a bit like that last one.
Yeah, there are some similarities here, right? Again, he's not necessarily distinguishing all of them. He's just trying to come up with and name the major salient attempts to explain what Moses did so wrong. Number 9, Rabbi Joseph Albo in his Sefer Haikarim criticizes Moses and Aaron for not having proceeded immediately to produce water for their people, something he claims they were capable of. That's very different. By allowing them to become frightened, they undermine the people's faith in God.
Okay.
Right? Meaning that they should have, once they saw that the water was there, they shouldn't have waited for the people to freak out. They should have immediately done, at least spoke to God and say, or, hey, we need to bring water now, right? So that was where they broke faith because they waited till the situation got desperate.
Okay.
Okay. Number 10, the Baal Ma'aseh Hashem explains that there had been an argument between Moses and the Israelites. The Israelites demanded that Moses produce the water from a different place where they had dug a hole, and that Moses was unwilling to speak to the rock which the Israelites had dug out. As a result, Moses became angry and threw his staff, not in order to hit the rock, but merely as an angry gesture. It so happened that the staff hit the rock God had intended to produce the water from.
Where did you get all that from?
Yeah, well, that's one of those where you're like, and I really only included that one, only just to show that lengths that the rabbis will go. And it's like, oh, I'm going to throw this staff, and oh, look, it happened to the wrong there. So, I mean, okay. Again, so take that with a humongous grain of salt. But I just want to put that one in there just to show that, okay, not all of them. I think with most of the other ones, I saw a lot of you nodding the first 9. Yeah, okay, I can see that. Okay, there's some logic there. Oh, okay, that last one, almost all of you were, what? I think that was almost all of you had that same reaction. Okay.
Is that classed as simply midrash or something beyond even midrash? That last one.
I have a few words for it, which I will not say in polite. Okay. Now, every once in a while, that could be midrash. Listen, it comes easy sometimes to make a story up and say it's midrash. I've been studying, so in the whole week of preparing for this, when I read that, I hadn't seen that anywhere, so I don't know. Listen, by no means have I studied everything, but that one was a very unique, like.
Is he normally that far out? The Baal
Ma'aseh Hashem, I haven't really studied a lot of him, so I'm not really sure. But that one was definitely
out there.
Yeah. So okay. So.
Rafi, what I don't understand is a God of compassion forgive Moses and Aaron. Allow them into Israel.
I'm going to come to that. Okay, hold that. I'm going to come to that. Okay. So he continues. None of the 10 explanations we have listed really answer all the questions that arise from this paragraph. Nachmanides already pointed out that 3 of the approaches we have listed here are unsatisfactory. That was in that long quote from Ramban, where most of the time he's, a lot of it he's taking down Maimonides' argument. Ibn Ezra demolishes, I love how he uses that, demolishes, feels like it's some social media post here. Oh, read this article, totally demolishes this congressman or whatever, right? He demolishes 3 more of the 10 approaches we have listed. I shall show how the remaining explanations also do not really explain the wording of the Torah satisfactorily. As to the approach of Rabbi Hananel shared by Nachmanides, that Moses attributed the production of the water to his own ability, that is patently impossible. Okay? Patently impossible, as Moses was well enough known to the people as a true prophet who had never attributed anything to his own ability. Okay? We saw that during the 10 plagues, that he said, God is going to do this. God is going to do that. I'm not doing it. God is going to do that, as a true prophet should, right? Even granted that Moses' power was such that he could have produced a miracle without calling upon God first, right? That was Alba was saying that they shouldn't have waited. It is in the nature of a true servant of the master that his accomplishments reflect credit on his master, in this instance on God, not the reverse. That's why he's saying Joseph Alba's approach is no good, it's unsatisfactory. Moreover, we find in Exodus 12:21 that Moses did not bother to tell the people that when he instructed them to draw the lamb for Passover, that he did so in the name of the Lord, right? Even at that time, the people were well aware that Moses would not have given such instructions unless he had been commanded to do so by God. Furthermore, in this situation described here, Moses was forced to use the words "notzei lachem," we shall extract for you, as they were in fact the ones whom God had delegated to do so either by word or by striking the rock. I do not concur with the approach of Rabbi Joseph Alba for the simple reason that once Moses had observed that God had withheld water from the community upon Miriam's death by letting the well disappear, who was he to countermand God's obvious will? How did he know that God did not want to discipline the people at that time? This made it imperative for Moses to plead with God by prostrating himself rather than by invoking his own powers of prophecy. He had to leave it to God to do what God saw fit to do at that time. The approach of the Baal HaMaaseh is, I love this. The approach of Baal HaMaaseh is full of thorns and thistles containing neither salt nor spices, so that I will not even bother to address myself to his arguments, begging his pardon.
Begging
Which is
his
a very rabbinically polite way of saying you are full of blankety blank.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I read that and I was like, okay.
But it's ever so polite. Or
Ever so polite, yet still
begging his pardon.
yeah. So if you ever want to put somebody down with something,
Yeah. Yes.
use this, because this is perfect. Because that's literally what he's saying is, you are full of it. Where in the hell did you get that from? I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot barge pole. So, again. Max, you have your hand up.
Yes. Just after all those examples were given, and given that Moses was inherently a humble, shy man,
Yep.
I'm sure this is going against everything we've just read, but maybe it wasn't a punishment at all in the regards of maybe he saw Moses becoming this angrier person, making mistakes that not normally would be made, that he kind of retired him knowing what would be needed coming up and going, well, let's take him out before he becomes the person who overstays his welcome. You know,
yeah, exactly. Hold
him
that.
out at the
No,
top.
perfect. I love it. Hold that thought. We're going to come right back to that. Okay. So he now tries to put his, in my search for a satisfactory explanation, I have only found peace of mind after pursuing the words of the ancient scholars as expressed in the Yalkut Shimoni. The author of that midrash writes as follows: Ya'an lohe man tembi. The Torah refers to 4 separate sins with this verse. Number 1, you did not believe me. Number 2, you did not sanctify. Number 3, you trespassed or you rebelled. You trespassed. And number 4, you rebelled. What does that mean? You did not believe, for I did not tell you to strike the rock, but to speak to it. You did not sanctify me to demonstrate that I could produce water from any rock of the Israelites' choosing. Number 3, you trespassed when you asked, should we produce water from this rock? You rebelled, for I told you to speak to the rock, i.e. teach the rock a chapter concerning Torah, and it will produce water, right? However, you have violated my instructions. And then he puts here, my edition of the Yalkut makes the important additional point somewhat earlier that whereas one hits a young child when one wants its obedience, one appeals to his intelligence once he has grown up. Similarly, whereas at the time when the Israelites were in Rephidim, that first one, 40 years earlier, Moses was instructed to hit the rock. Now the rock had matured and it would respond to a more sophisticated approach, i.e. it could be spoken to. Moses could teach it a chapter of Torah. So far the words of the Yalkut. So my drash and my explanation on this, I think in reading this, and by the way, there's one other quote I could have put in here. There is a Italian philosopher commentator, Luzzatto. He writes, Moses, our teacher, committed one sin, but our commentators have heaped on him 13 and more, each one of them having invented a fresh one. I have therefore hitherto refrained from going into this problem for fear I might attribute a new sin to Moses, which was his way of saying, I'm not even going to touch this because it's been covered.
Yes.
And every time someone else goes into it, oh, here's something else Moses did wrong. So I'm not going to do that.
Remind me who said all this that you're
This was,
quoting now?
Luzzatto. That last one was.
No, no, the whole thing. Who summarized the whole thing?
Oh, Or Chaim. He was. His name is Chaim ibn Attar, I think. Or Chaim. Okay. He was born at the end of the 17th century, died mid 18th century. Born in Morocco, died in Israel. Okay. So my drush on this last part and what he's coming back to is saying, I think, similar to what Matt was saying, and I think somebody else brought up, is that I don't know that this is actually a punishment. Because if we look at the actual instructions back, what was Moses' charge, right? He says, I want you to bring them to the land of Israel, not necessarily into the land of Israel. Okay, that's important to understand. And number two, he's been the leader for a very, very long time. Moses was the leader to take them out of Egypt, to lead them in the wandering. Moses was not the leader to take them into the land of Israel. That was not his job, that was not his role, and that was not the kind of leader that he needed to be. And we see this in the changing of the guard, right? Miriam dies, Aaron dies, and the generation is passing away. Moses doesn't relate to them anymore because they are a new generation. We see hints of this and themes of this throughout the Bible. The 10 commandments that are given in Exodus speak of, for example, when you're talking about Shabbat, 6 days God worked to create the world, and the seventh day God rested. Therefore, you shall observe Shabbat. In Deuteronomy, when it's giving the Torah, it says, because I took you to the land of Egypt and the miracles and whatever happened there, you shall observe Shabbat. Well, why doesn't it use the same terms? Because different generations, different people need to be addressed in a different way. And what he's referring to here is something that it seems that Moses is just not capable of, right? And what Matt, I think you were implying was he needs to be retired because he's in a way outlived his usefulness, right? In a way, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a punishment. It's reality. This is life. A leader is a leader for a specific time. Can you imagine, and I'm just sorry, because I grew up in the States, but Abraham Lincoln was a phenomenal wartime leader. Would he have been the leader to lead the people during the peace? Don't know. Churchill, a phenomenal wartime leader. But what's the first thing Churchill wanted to do after the Second World War was winding down? Anybody ever hear of Operation Unthinkable? Anybody know what that is? Just as the war was winding down, what Churchill wanted to do is recruit the surviving German army, the American, French, Poles, and the Brits, and then immediately declare war on the Soviet Union and push them out of Eastern Europe. This was a real plan that Churchill was pushing. A phenomenal wartime leader, unified the people. Peace was not the time for Churchill to be involved. And the people, I think, recognize that because they voted him out of office in a landslide. What was it? May 1945, I think it was? Yeah, something like that, right? That in a landslide. So we see many times that the leader, the right person comes along at the right time to do that specific thing. But once that thing is over, they're not necessarily the ones who should stick around. And this is perhaps the Torah trying to give some kind of explanation of why that is. And I think we misread it if we see it as a punishment. Because it's not really, it doesn't use the same words and connotations when the Israelites, for example, sin and are punished, right? It's just saying, and I think perhaps to read it, maybe a little bit of a drush, but to read it as you are not capable of speaking to these people in the way I need you to. You are not capable of sanctifying my name anymore in the way that they need to see it. In the generation before, you were perfect. You were my guy. But now, with a new generation who have different experiences, or excuse me, they don't have the experiences of our ancestors who needed a blunt approach, right? They needed to see those amazing signs and wonders. This generation hasn't really seen that. They needed a more subtler approach. Don't hit the rock, speak to the rock. You're not capable, which is just, it's not a comment on the magnitude of your amazing character. It's just, this is a limitation. You've bumped up against that. All right?
Convinced. I don't see it as a punishment, Rafi. I just see that it's a God that has willpower, and for another time we can discuss. It's the God of the Bible, man. He's an angry God.
Well, it's don't. Yeah. Well, let me just say, Anna. God is sometimes angry in the Bible. God is sometimes compassionate in the Bible. God is sometimes forgiving in the Bible. God is sometimes judgmental in the Bible. I think you, and honestly, I think you do a little bit.
A transcendental God here, like the God that we aspire to hold within ourselves.
So one of these days, I really need to go.
Attributes.
Right. One of these days, we will do one of the sessions will be like the amazing changing nature of God in the Bible. And you go through it, and there is an incredible sense of differing and changing theology in the Bible, from Bereshit through Deuteronomy, even in the prophets and the writings, very, very, very different. If you think there's one unified monolithic approach and understanding of God, you are very mistaken. So perhaps that's one of the sessions we'll do. I just want to make sure that yes, God is angry sometimes in the Bible, absolutely. But don't think that that's the only thing that God is portrayed as in the Bible.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that don't we aspire for God to be beyond?
Oh, I see. That God shouldn't have those kinds of human emotions, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, hey,
that,
nobody's perfect.
And that Moses taking him over and then he died. Huh? Anyway, I don't agree with the story.
Well, I want to be clear. That's just one interpretation of that last one. Just as a way of illustrating, there isn't one approach that the rabbis really can come around and be like, this is what this means. More than many of the stories we've read, there's a tremendous amount of whatchamacallit, they don't know. They're puzzled. They really are. Wow, this is a really hard one for us to get our heads around. All right. Anybody else who hasn't said anything yet? Alana, Meira, Tim, anything you guys want to add? If not, you're happy. Alana, I know you're eating dinner, so that's cool. You can keep on doing that.
I wanted to ask, if I may, is
Sure.
this an example of God knowing what's going to happen, but giving people free choice to make their choice? Moses made his choice to hit the rock, and God knew that would happen, and it actually fitted in with God's plan that a new leader would arise to take the people into Israel.
Yeah, so that was one of the approaches that Isaac Arama took. He has and that was like a huge, long, and he compares it, this Moses, that's exactly, Dina, the same thing you're saying, for the same reason that God doesn't really interfere with Pharaoh, because he knows what Pharaoh's going to choose anyway. And only after the seventh plague, then it says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. The first 7 is Pharaoh hardened his heart. And it's this thing, I know what you're going to do, and I'm going to let you hang yourself by your own petard, right? So that is absolutely one of the, I mean, listen, there were so many different, there's no way I can include all of them, but that's definitely one of the approaches that some of the commentators take, that God knew what was going to happen, and it played out exactly the way God foretold it, but it was still Moses' free choice to believe in that way. All right.
Thank you.
2 weeks. I will see you guys.
Holiday.
I thank you very much. I will see you guys. Well, there's Shabbat services this week. If you want to come, Friday night, Masorti service at 5:45, Shabbat morning, 9 o'clock. Progressive, 6:15 Shabbat Live, and 10 o'clock on Shabbat morning. If you want to come, you're all welcome. You must pre-register. All right. The numbers restrictions are gone to the extent that we could have. You just need to have enough social distancing space. So in the Red Synagogue, you can have up to 100 people. In the main synagogue, up to 160 now. So, but still, the restriction. You would have got the letter that was sent out. The Torah is still not going to be passed around. You'll come up for an aliyah. You'll just rise from your seat, slowly, as things
Should do both
hopefully.
Friday and Saturday.
I'm sorry?
Oh, yeah, I'm muted accidentally.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, guys, have a wonderful evening. We will see you all soon.
Have a wonderful holiday.
And you're welcome here.
Holiday.
Bye.
Bye.